All right, everyone, welcome and thanks so much for joining. We're psyched to talk about this very important topic.
Basic foundation of life.
Totally, yeah. Right? I mean, it is the pillar to our health, and we'll get more into that. But before we start, I'd love to hear kind of where everyone's calling from. So if you are on a computer, you will be able to type in. There's a chat section, so go ahead and type in where you're calling from. We love to hear that. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for taking the time on your Friday. And we are going to shall we just dive right in?
Let's do it.
We're going to dive in. All right, so we have, cool, we are spreading across the globe here. All right, can we all see the slides? See the slides? We got Jamie from Rochester. I'm wondering if that is Jamie, who I know. I grew up in Rochester.
New York or Minnesota?
New York.
Oh,
yeah. Yep. Is it Jamie Parker? Are you on the other line? Hello, welcome. Okay, so we're going to dive in. All right, and it looks like we can all see the slides, which is great, and I can control them, which is even better. Okay, so my name is Sarah Klein, and we both live in Durango, Colorado. That's why we can be together on the screen, which is so nice. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, an avid yogini, and yoga facilitator or yoga teacher. I do one-on-one health coaching and lots of group programs, some through a 30-day challenge and some through kind of smaller, more intimate groups as well. My personal belief kind of through the work that I do is that health is much deeper than what is on our plate, and we're going to talk about that today. I believe that true health is really a balanced recipe of the way that we're moving our body, how consistently we're moving our body, the way that we are talking to ourselves, our mindfulness practices, our stress management, our relationships, our work, really everything contributes to that plate of health. And then the approach that I tend to take is through a 5-pillar approach to health, looking at what we're eating and focusing on real, whole, clean foods, how we're moving, mindfulness, and then pairing that with support and accountability to kind of answer the questions, why do we do what we do when we know what we know? And then we have Dr. Nicola here, and she'll get into more details on her work. I'll start with 3 tips around sleep, and then we'll have Dr. Nicola take over. All right, sleep, here we go. So I thought I'd start the first slide off with this idea of breaking the stereotype around sleep. We often in the Western world praise ourselves on getting little sleep and getting so much done on little sleep. Or we might even have negative stereotypes on people who actually get the right amount of sleep. They're lazy. So there's a lot of stories that can exist around sleep, and those stories can impact our habits around sleep. So I wanted to start off with some really interesting research on sleep. And I think that I think it's safe to say that we all know that sleep is important. But I think it is also safe to say that we don't really know how important it is on a cellular level. So kind of side note, there's an awesome NPR podcast, Hidden Brain is what it's called, and they just did a big sleep episode. So if you want more information on some research around sleep, I would check out that podcast, Hidden Brain on NPR. All right, so here's some research. So research shows us, and these are in controlled studies where they had participants sleep for 4 hours or less, that the cancer-fighting cells that are called natural killer cells decreased by 70% when we got 4 hours of sleep or less. That is a huge impact on our immune system. So as you can see, sleep dramatically impacts our immune system or our ability to fight cancer specifically. There's research that shows the good old all-nighter that people pull when they're cramming for tests or whatever it might be, packing for a big trip, whatever's relevant in your world, we actually retain 40% less information when we decrease our sleep to kind of try to cram more in. So it doesn't work. The link between cancer and sleep is so strong that the World Health Organization has started to label shift work, where you stay up all night and work at night, as having a carcinogenic impact on the body. So we all, at least in America, because I know we're not all calling from the US, we get this beautiful thing called daylight savings. And which I have a 5-month-old, and I'm like, why did you do this to me? We had such a good thing going on. So that kind of poses this opportunity to do some research twice a year. When we lose an hour of sleep, the heart attack rate goes up 24% in the United States. When we gain an hour of sleep in the spring or in the fall, we just gained an hour. Yeah, so in the fall, it goes down 21%. So as you can see, there's a big correlation that is really interesting between cardiovascular health and sleep. Then when we get 6 hours or less of sleep, cortisol is automatically increased in our bloodstream. And as we know, chronic cortisol in the bloodstream, the stress hormone, has a lot of negative impacts on our health. But, I like to live in the world of nutrition. It impacts what we crave and how we digest our food as well. So as you can see, it becomes a slippery slope. If you don't get the right amount of sleep, your cravings actually increase and your metabolism actually decreases. So when we're wondering why we have these crazy cravings or why we're overeating, we can actually look at our sleep patterns to solve some of those problems on a deeper level than versus working with willpower and just kind of slapping yourself on the wrist and saying, why did you eat that? You shouldn't have eaten that. You're a bad person for eating that, or whatever the story is. It a lot of times is stemmed from a lack of sleep, and that's due to the cortisol hormone. So what do we do about this? Well, we want to create habits, and that's what we're going to talk about, that make sleep non-negotiable. We want to put everything working for us, or, all cylinders firing, so that we are able, or at least have half of a chance, to get a good night's sleep, because it is so important for our health, truly deeply important for our health. And with that, we really want to start to kind of notice what our story is around sleep. Do we allow ourselves or give ourselves permission to get that 8 hours of sleep? So a lot of times, in the working world, people are like, oh, I don't need those extra 2 hours. I only need 6 hours of sleep. But that's going to add up over time on your health. And if we really needed 6 hours of sleep, evolution would have gotten rid of that because sleep, if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, isn't necessarily the smartest thing. We go into this hibernation state. We don't look to find a mate. We don't take care of our young. We don't do all of the things that we're set up to do. So obviously getting an 8-hour chunk of sleep is really, really important. Even if you think you can function off of 6, we need that 8 hours for our long-term longevity, vitality, and really it is the cornerstone to health.
There was a study done where people were getting 7 hours or less of sleep for 2 weeks, and that had the equivalent of missing an entire night of sleep on cognitive function and immunity and all that sort of stuff. So, when we make up these stories around, everybody else needs 9 hours, but I only need 7 or 6, we kind of are really selling ourselves short.
Totally. Then we feed into this story in our culture of like, oh, that person's lazy. Like, no, we need to sleep.
He's got time to sleep.
Yeah,
there's
right.
so much going on that I couldn't possibly sleep well.
Right. And it really does. It starts with that story, I think. All right. So optimal sleep tip number 2. So Matthew Walker is he's the author of Why We Sleep, and a big guy in research around sleep. So he says that his number one tip is to go to bed and get up at the same time every single day, even on the weekends. And this routine really trains our system so that it knows now is time to go to bed, now is time to wake, and it keeps that cycle going. And I see this with clients a lot, in the sense that they get a poor night's sleep, and then they sleep in really late that next morning. And then half of their morning is kind of messed with. They don't necessarily do all the things that are going to serve them in their day, all their other health habits. And then they can't fall asleep the next night because they slept in and they didn't get the right movement, et cetera, et cetera. And then it becomes this cycle. And before you know it, you're not going to bed till 2 a.m. and you're getting up at 10:30 or 11, or you're getting up when you have to for work. And then, it turns into this vicious cycle. So instead of just I think, yes, you want to get into bed at the same time every night. And absolutely, that is good sleep hygiene. But let's look at what we do when we wake up. Because when we wake up and create a nice morning routine, that's going to start us off on the right foot. We're going to use the right amount of energy through the day, and then we're more likely to actually fall asleep at that specifically set nighttime. So there's so much research on why morning routines are critical for health, for your health habits, and for productivity, and for happiness. And there's a lot of research I've read that, the CEO's morning, what are the big wigs doing in the morning? And number one, for me at least, is to get moving physically. Get some exercise in the morning before you start your day. Your body is your anchor into the present moment. And being in the present moment is where we can really communicate well with our nervous system and be in control of our nervous system, instead of having our nervous system being in control of us. So in order to kind of de-stress right off the bat, we want to get moving in the morning. So that could be as simple as a 5-minute yoga practice, or it could be an hour and a half at the gym. But start small, in the sense of make it realistic, make it doable, so that it happens. Don't say, all right, I don't work out at all, and now I'm going to work out for 2 hours every morning. That's not going to happen. Start with 5 minutes. It will change your day, and before you know it, 5 minutes will grow into 10 to 30 to 2 hours, or whatever serves you and your body and your lifestyle. Then eat a healthy breakfast. Breakfast is the most important part of the day. It starts your metabolism. It starts your digestive fire. It helps create energy throughout the day. And just with that, you want to be mindful that if you're eating a sugary breakfast, that's actually going to spike your blood sugar and mess with your cravings throughout the day. So you want to eat a good, healthy breakfast. And then start your morning with intention. And I think that this is really important and very easy to skip. And it might only take 5 seconds to do that. And I know that you're going to talk a little bit about this, but maybe this is starting with a gratitude practice, or some kind of prayer, or a meditation, or taking 3 deep belly breaths, so that when you wake with intention and focus. And therefore, that kind of gets you moving on the right foot for the rest of the day. And then when we meet our bedtime, we're more ready and fulfilled for that bedtime. And prepared for it. So get up at the same time and go to sleep at the same time. All right, last one, optimal tip number 3. And this one works like a charm for me personally. And I've had clients have amazing success with it. So if you find that when you get into bed, the trouble is falling asleep, often, if I were working one-on-one with someone, I would say, well, what is holding you back from sleep? And often it is the chitter chatter of the mind. In yoga, we call it the vrittis. It's a perfect word for that, vrittis. It's the constant commentary that's rolling through our mind that we can't necessarily shut off. And I know you're going to talk about some other things on this, but our mind loves to jump into the future pull ourselves into the past and avoid the present moment. And in order to really have restful sleep, we have to drop into the present moment. So we can use practices of meditation to provide space for that, for our access point into the present moment, which will turn down the volume of the mind and allow us to therefore turn down the nervous system and fall asleep. Now, just a little side note, we can fall asleep when our nervous system is spiked. We're able to. But when we're looking at healthy sleep, it's not necessarily how long we sleep is very important, but it's also how deep we go into our REM cycles and our sleep rhythm. And when we are falling asleep in a stressful state, we actually don't go as deep. So we don't have as quality of sleep. And you can think of that from an evolutionary standpoint where, if we were in the middle of having a tribe come and attack our village, we wanted to be on alert, but we still have to sleep. But if we were to wake up, we would be able to really respond to that threat. So progressive relaxation is an amazing technique because it uses the physical body to anchor the mind into the present moment, which allows us to access our sleep. And progressive relaxation is a technique that you focus really, really intensely on certain parts of your body. You start on one side of your body and you work your way up. I always start at my toes. And essentially the way it would go is you would find yourself really, really comfortable in your bed, palms faced up, eyes closed, connect with your breath a couple of rounds, and then bring all your attention into your toes. Think about the temperature of your toes, any textures that are touching your toes, socks or the blankets, and then allow the toes to relax, get heavy, relax, relax, relax. When you feel the toes are relaxed, then you move up and you get really detailed. Talk about the top of the foot, the bottom of the foot, the heel, the shin, the calf, and move your way all the way up into your body. And most of the time, I know for me, I'll fall asleep by the time I get to my quads. And it gives your mind a way to really anchor and let go of all the chitter chatter that is resisting sleep, and find that present moment. So that's called progressive relaxation. I know that if you were to Google progressive relaxation, I bet you could find a audio version of it that you could practice with. On my website, I have a blog that talks about how to do progressive relaxation. And you know what? I'll throw that in the follow-up email to make it easy. So there we go. That's what I got for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, my name is Nicola Dehlinger. I am a naturopathic doctor here in Durango. My practice is Pura Vida Natural Medicine. And I really, as a naturopathic doctor, I have this unique access point for people that are coming in, and generally I'm not the first person that somebody comes to consult with. Usually I am the end of the line because they've tried X, Y, and Z and it hasn't worked so far. And so I really have an interest in finding out what is really causing whatever the dis-ease is, whatever the symptom state is, and how do we really work with the body in order to affect cure. And I do mean that word cure. I don't mean as long as I take my turmeric and my fish oil, I don't get symptomatic, but when I forget, my knee flares up again. I mean, we're moving into a place of real balance. And for me, over the years, the focus has really become more on this mind-body connection, this mind-body medicine, and listening deeply to our bodies and what we have to say. So I like to work with adults and teenagers and even kiddos. I was teaching a class this morning where I was just teaching the progressive relaxation.
Oh,
so
awesome.
It's really funny, to kindergarten, first and second graders, so 5 through 8. Super cool. And my deep belief is that each of us has a capacity to live vitally at any age, and that there are simple and inexpensive and very effective ways to optimize health if we can get ourselves back into balance. And usually that doesn't mean adding in 20 things. Usually it means simply slowing down, listening to our body, and then actually responding. So a real simple example of that is when you're maybe working at your computer and you've got 20 emails to get sent out and you feel your bladder kick in because you need to use the bathroom, to really get up and go and use the bathroom in that moment, not after you just send this one more email. Not that would ever happen. I can't tell you how many people I have that actually choose not to drink water in a day because they don't want to have that urge, because they don't want to interrupt their flow in front of their computer. But what happens when we stand up and walk to the bathroom is that we realize, oh, I am thirsty, and we fill our water, we get another cup of tea, or whatever it might be, and we are actually moving our body, circulating, and kind of connecting, giving ourselves a chance to connect in rather than zone out and just hammer through the work. So really, as much as anything, I like to really meet people where they're at and create a plan that's going to meet your unique needs, because even if I've got 100 people all coming to me with anxiety, nobody is presenting in the same way, and nobody has the exact same reason that this anxiety has developed in their system. So that's what's fun for me, is getting to work with each person and figure out, well, what's the key for you. Okay, so that said, I'm so thrilled that we're talking about sleep, because it's such a cornerstone of everything else, be that organ regeneration or hormone production or liver detoxification or immune boosting or nervous system resetting, all of it. It's so important. And for so many people, especially in our current culture of go, busy, it's something that can be pretty elusive for a lot of folks. So I'm so glad that we created this for us. Tip number 4 is something that you probably all heard before, but again, as a naturopathic doc, so the root of doctor is docere, the Latin root word, and that actually means to teach. And so that's a huge part of what my role is to not just tell you what's good for you and bad for you, because how often does shaming ourselves or each other really work as a long-term motivational technique? I'm going to go with that so often. But really, when we understand the physiology of what's happening in our body and the science behind why it's being recommended that we do what we do, we have a lot more success, because there's a deeper understanding and it makes more sense. So screen time, everybody knows it, not a lot of people listen, but using screens before bed can disrupt sleep. And there's a fact that we know that blue light that's coming off of the screen, even as we're all sitting here together, and there's a slight shake to the light as well. And that stimulates the pineal gland in the brain. And the pineal gland is what helps us to secrete melatonin, which should be relatively low as our day goes on. And then as it gets closer and closer to nighttime, it comes up, and that should be matched. I'm trying to figure out my hands here. It should be matched by the cortisol, which should be high in the morning to kind of get us up and awake, kind of comes down. And so there's this crisscross effect. So if we are stressing out at night, if we're checking our emails, if we're doing one more task, if we're knocking out that one last thing and we're getting our cortisol going, then we're really impacting that natural physiology of that crisscross that happens, where the cortisol dips down, the melatonin naturally comes up. And so we can do that when we get stressed, or we can do that simply from looking at a screen, and that creates that stimulation for the pineal. The pineal gets triggered awake, and it doesn't know that it's supposed to be secreting the nighttime hormone. So this can really have a huge impact on the physiology of why it might be hard for you to know, you might physically feel really tired, but your brain just kind of can't shut off. And it's because we've given our brain a cue that it's time to wake up. It's time to be functioning and that sort of thing. So what do? Turn off your screens at least an hour before bed. Especially now in the age of Kindle and iPads and Netflix and all of these wonderful screen-based items, people are really not willing to turn their screens off, an hour before bed or more. But that would be my number 1 recommendation. And this gives an opportunity to create another bedtime ritual. When you turn your screens off, do you turn the lights down low? Do you make yourself a cup of tea? Do you get on the floor and do some gentle stretching? Do you take a bath? This is a crazy one, talk to your partner. It's a really nice time to connect with yourself, with someone in your family, and just slow everything down. And that gives your body, similar to when we want to digest well, we want to give our body a cue that we're eating. When we want to go to sleep, we want to cue our body that it's time to go to sleep. And so really shutting that down and then creating a ritual instead. So if you're someone who likes to unwind by watching television or movies or shows, what else could you do? What else could you create and bring in? And could you shut it off maybe 20 minutes, one show's worth earlier than you thought you might, to kind of give yourself enough time? And that's something else, is that if we say, oh, I want my bedtime to be 10 o'clock, I'm going to shut the TV off at 10 o'clock, it's another 20 or 30 minutes by the time you turn off the lights, lock the doors, feed the dogs, get the dogs in, whatever you're doing with the dogs, brushing your teeth, going to the bathroom, putting pajamas on, all of that stuff. It actually takes time. So be aware of that and build that into your nighttime routine. I like to assume a minimum of 20 minutes from the moment I say, I want to go to bed, to the moment where my head hits the pillow. It's at least 20 minutes and more often 30, just because we're doing stuff and putting stuff away or whatever. And if you are not ready to step into letting go of your screens before bed, this is all about baby steps and access points. There's these really cool covers that can just go right over your screen of your laptop, your iPad, your computer, your television, whatever. And it blocks some of the blue light that comes out from the screen. And so it doesn't have that same impact on the pineal gland and that cortisol pathway. And so that can be, harm reduction, so where are you on the spectrum? That can be one really easy step. And I put a website that I don't have any affiliation with, but they're called lowbluelights.com. And they actually, which is kind of cool, but a lot of people don't wear them because they do look a little dorky, but they actually make glasses that you can wear all day long so that you're not constantly getting that adrenal pineal stimulation from simply doing the work that you need to do on your computer. So anyway, lots of good options to still be engaged with your screen, but have it be less impactful on your physiology. Okay, number 5, how to deal with the busy brain. So like Sarah was saying, a lot of us have a hard time. We're worrying about what we need to get done tomorrow. We're stressing about how we handled the situation earlier and what we could have done different. And so again, when we build this nighttime or bedtime ritual, create a little bit of space for your brain to breathe. That's another reason why talking with your partner might be a really nice thing to do at the end of the day. Just give yourself some time to process all that you've accomplished and achieved, and the challenges that you've faced, and create time for yourself to allow your brain to unwind that. The reason that our brain kicks in when we're trying to relax for sleep is because it's probably, unfortunately, maybe the first time all day that we've sat or laid and taken a deep breath and stopped focusing on something outside of ourselves. And then we get so frustrated with ourselves because we can't fall asleep right away, but we haven't created any other brain space to just simply be from the get-go. Even watching a show or a movie, we're getting input. We're not really connecting into our heart center. And so that goes back to this idea of a bedtime ritual being so important. Why don't you, or, for some people, they prefer to write things down or draw or whatever. But is there some way that you can get that sort of information downloaded and out of your system before you hop into bed? So a to-do list at bedtime is often a really nice thing. I often advise people to have a pad of paper and a pen, because that's usually the sticking point, if they have the paper but nothing to write with, in your bedside table, so that as you're falling asleep, if your mind starts checking off all these boxes, write it down. Take a minute. I keep a little headlamp in my nightstand, so that if we turn lights off and I'm having a hard time falling asleep, I can write something down or pick up a book and read for a few minutes, and not disturb my partner and wake him up. So I think that's something that can be really, really helpful, is just write it down, get it on paper, and then ideally end that list with 3 things or more, if you're feeling wild, that you're grateful for. It's just how can we end on an up note, on a positive, and really call in all that you have accomplished. Us humans have a tendency to focus on what we didn't do enough of, or well enough, or We could have done more, we could have done it differently, but we don't tend to give ourselves a lot of kudos for the things that we did achieve. And so ending by saying, wow, I did this and I did that and I got that done. Last night I had book club. I was teaching a nutrition class at my son's school. So I made chocolate bombs and I made a salad and then I made dinner for my son and a different dinner for my husband. And, and I was like, that was 45 minutes. That's pretty great. I was like having a moment with myself, because if I don't celebrate me, I'm not teaching anybody else to celebrate me either. So we get into a lot of trouble there. Excuse me. It's very dry in Colorado where we live, especially in the fall. And then if you have done your list and you're laying down and your brain picks it back up, just, kind of like you would for a small child that you would, just, hey, remind them, hey, we've got it covered. We've already written it down. We've got it nailed. We're not going to miss out. We've set ourselves up for success. Don't worry. No matter what, you're taken care of. And just kind of do that mantra, and then going into progressive relaxation is fantastic, because sometimes we do need to provide another activity for our brain to do besides chew on all the things that we should have done better or could do tomorrow, and that we're afraid that we're not going to have enough time or perseverance or resources to accomplish. But just give yourself some space to have these concerns, because they're real. We have a lot we need to do in a day, but then also remind yourself, create a container to help yourself come back to a place of ease around it all, because you will get it done. And if you don't, it's probably not that big of a deal anyway, honestly. We make up a lot of story around have to. It's a whole nother webinar. And the last sleep tip for today for getting some optimal sleep is making sure you're not hungry. And I'm seeing this more and more and more in my practice as more and more people go into a ketogenic or a paleo type diet, where they're really excluding grains and legumes and basically complex carbohydrates. And I have a lot of people that are having a hard time sleeping through the night. So you might fall asleep okay, but you're waking up and having a hard time falling asleep, or waking up frequently and able to go back to sleep maybe, but there's this kind of constant waking that's happening every hour or two. And that's not great, because we're not getting into that deep stage 4 and 5 and REM sleep that's really, really restorative to the nervous system and all the organs and that sort of thing. So make sure you don't go to bed hungry. There's this tendency that a lot of us have to eat relatively heavy during the day and then eat very, very light at dinner, or maybe just a salad or just something simple, which is fine, but make sure that there's at least a half of a cup of some sort of complex carbohydrate. That complex carb is going to help fuel your sleep and help you get through the night more readily. If you have a house with a small child, like I do, I have a 7-year-old at home, we tend to eat around 5:30 at night, which is great. But for my husband, it's really, really hard on his system, because we go to sleep between 9 and 10, and he's hungry by then. It's 4 or 5 hours have passed. He does pretty physical work for a living, and he's hungry. And so having something to eat right before bed is really, really important. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend having them eat and then hopping right into bed, because you do want a little bit of digestive fire to help you process that. But making sure that maybe an hour or so before bed, you have a little snack. And that could be, I have a picture of a chia pudding here, something with a little bit of carb, some protein, and some fat, to just give yourself enough fuel to sleep well. More and more and more often, I am seeing people with what I'm calling deficient insomnia. And it means that we are so depleted in our nervous system, in our nutrition, that we don't actually have enough chi or energy or prana to actually help us fuel good sleep. So this is something that's been really, really helpful for a number of my patients. It's just simply shifting how they eat and making sure they get a little bit of complex carb at the nighttime. Ideally, for adrenal health, we should be doing carb cycling. And from what I've read and what my understanding is, and there's a great book out there called The Adrenal Reset Diet by Alan Christensen, and he goes into real great detail about all of this. It's not very heavy. It's a pretty easy read. And the second half of the book is meal plans and recipes and all sorts of cool things. But basically, we're supposed to start our day with protein and veg, And then for lunch, have more protein and veg, maybe a little bit of carb. And then at nighttime is when we're supposed to have more of a balance between the carb, the fat, and the protein. And so for whatever that's worth, I think it's really important to think about, because most of us start our day pretty carb heavy. And like Sarah was saying, what we start our day with is what we're telling our brain to look for and to crave for the rest of the day. So if we start ourselves off with a real nice breakfast of some sort of protein and veg, then we're cueing our brain to look for that for the rest of the day. One of my favorite breakfasts in the world is soup. It's really, really simple. You've generally already made it, so it's very, very quick. If you just put it in the bowl and heat it up and call it good, it travels really well, all that sort of stuff, but it's a really easy way to get in protein and veg and just try to think outside that breakfast box, which generally consists of cereals and bagels and toast and waffles, and it's just a lot of carb heavy, especially if you're someone who doesn't enjoy eggs. So it can be hard to figure out what's a healthy breakfast, but we can kind of expand that box and go way, way beyond it. So something as simple as miso soup with some frozen peas, I can get that out the door and ready in under 2 minutes, and it's fantastic. It's a good way to start. So yeah, so tip there is having a little snack before you go to bed, and just check it out. Try it for a week and see if that doesn't help that waking up cycle, because we're actually hungry.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask you, are there any specific yoga poses you recommend to help calm that nervous system down?
Yeah, definitely. You can think of kind of different yoga poses as the gateway into your stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system, so that the shape of that you're making with a yoga pose communicates directly with your nervous system, which can really help to anchor you into that present moment and allow you to go to sleep. So a great one would be legs up the wall. And in that case, you can do it if your bed is touching a wall, or go down to the ground and move your hip over to the wall and then just stick the legs straight up. That one is fabulous because your legs are inverted. The body knows it's safe, so it can really relax. Forward folds, so sitting down and forward bending is really good. So in elementary school, they would call it butterfly pose. When the bases of your feet are touching and you forward fold like that, that's a great one. Or just legs stretched out would be another good one. Those would probably be the best ones.
Thanks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, we'd love to connect with you in the future. So if you're interested, I have a website up here, and I'm on Facebook. I do a lot of free 2-minute videos, 3-minute videos, kind of for some inspiration. And I do offer a free 15-minute consult if you're interested in learning more about me or naturopathic medicine or how we might work together. Give us a call or send us an email.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I also do a free complimentary nutrition consultation. So if anyone would like to book that, just give me a ring or send me an email. My website's Whole Health Lab, and you can kind of find everything there. So thanks so much. Thanks for joining. If you have any questions, so I'm going to send the recording out. I promise the progressive relaxation, but probably nothing else, the slides. So that will all come via email, and yeah, stay connected. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Sleep well.
Yes, right. Sleep well.
Yeah, sweet dreams.
Take care.